And good morning and welcome to another live stream. First things first, I really need everyone's support who's watching this. I need those people who aren't subscribed to my channel to please subscribe and select all notifications. Once I get into a few hundred subscribers, then I can start getting paid by YouTube. As currently I'm paying for this out of pocket, and it's like everyone else, I'm struggling with finances. Even with the rate cut yesterday, it's not going to mean much to us. But today, I want to touch on a couple of things. The first one I want to talk about is the 60 Minutes report last Sunday on the taxi industry of fraud and abuse. Now, I've been in the disability sector for 40 odd years. And I've known that taxi drivers defrauding customers is quite common. I myself personally developed my own system. When I went to Sydney, I'd have headphones plugged into my iPhone, and I would give the Siri command and say, create route from Sydney Airport to St Vincent's Private Hospital. Then I'd wait a few seconds and I say direct route. Then the taxi drivers more likely start asking me questions about what I was doing. And I said it was a special app on my phone for people who are blind, so we get a direct route. It records it and gives you a quote on the length of time it took, all that sort of stuff. And it generally works. So I've been aware of this for quite a long time. I was also aware of the physical abuse going on from taxi drivers to their customers with disabilities. And when I watched this 60 Minutes report where the taxi driver was slapping his clients on the back of the head or the forehead or on the chest, not strapping the wheelchairs, locking the wheelchairs down properly, not putting their brakes on, putting too many people in wheelchairs in the taxi and going to point A to point B, and the long way around, so they get more in their fees. But I'll just play a short segment of the 60 Minutes program. I won't do the whole thing. It's about 20 minutes long. So I'll just get you to play that segment, please, Chris.
Suspicious of what else the driver had been up to, he accessed the CCTV in the maxi taxi. What the senior constable discovered was more than 300 hours of what can only be described as incredibly distressing footage. It shows driver Jarnail Singh transporting profoundly disabled passengers around Melbourne. Most people would accept it's a job that requires care and compassion. But as you can see, Singh displayed neither of those qualities. In fact, he was nothing but cruel, physically abusing and emotionally taunting his terrified victims.
It was just a consistent theme, day in, day out. He just didn't secure the wheelchairs. He didn't apply the brakes. Multiple assaults. It was just dangerous driving. He was drinking whilst he was driving. He wasn't wearing his own seatbelt. It was just unbelievable.
When you see how they're being treated in the back of that cab, how do you describe that in layman's terms?
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. How can someone treat another human being like this?
When Liam gets into a taxi or an Uber, how vulnerable is he?
He's 100% vulnerable because he cannot communicate in any way if he's being mistreated. If he's being abused or mistreated, in any way. He cannot tell anyone he trusts what has happened to him. So he's a sitting duck, really.
Yeah. Look at this. Look at the city.
Sandy Guy's son, Liam, was one of Jarnail Singh's regular passengers and frequent victims. Liam can't talk, but this CCTV, obtained by 60 Minutes, speaks a million words.
He was treated like an animal. Our beloved Liam was treated like an animal. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life.
How many rides did Liam take with this taxi driver?
I know that Singh was driving Liam for at least a year before that, and that is something that causes me just the most terrible trauma, to even think what that man might have done to Liam in that previous year.
How can this be allowed to happen? What are you doing?
It obviously triggers that response from you. What do you say?
I'm getting a bit emotional because I see it. It's a combination of anger and real upset. I mean, how can this be allowed to happen? It's just disgraceful. And I look at the driver there hitting the passenger on the head. You know, I just can't believe it. Just can't believe it.
We showed this vision to the former chairman of the Victorian taxi regulator, Graham Samuel. The fact that they...
So that's just a short clip. And that young man, Liam, his mother's words, our beloved Liam was treated like an animal. You know, what if that was your son, your daughter, your sibling? What would you expect to happen to the person defrauding and physically assaulting your child? Now, that taxi driver pleaded guilty to 499 assaults and defrauding. He was fined $20,000, but he never seen the inside of a jail. He was drinking while he was driving, yet he never saw the inside of a jail. He put not only himself, but his passengers of being killed or badly injured. 499 charges he pleaded guilty to, and all he got was a $20,000 fine. So where's the NDIA Fraud and Recovery Department in all this? On the hit list for the defrauding of customers are NDIS clients, participants, people with disabilities, aged care, and hospitals. Now, we've seen a couple of weeks ago, I did a thing on my live stream where a man received money from a victim of crime compensation, but the NDIS compensation team came in and took $20,000 of his compensation for being a victim of a crime because they said it was related to his disability. Now, I've interviewed the NDIS compensation team. Now, if somebody's injured and they're going to sue, the NDIA have the power to walk in and can take control of your court action, whether you want them to or not. Now, they haven't done it at that stage when I did the interview, but they have the power to walk in and take over a court case if a person's suing for compensation and if they're on the NDIS or could go on the NDIS. Now, we've all heard that the government wants to save money, stop the bleeding of the NDIA costs. It's been blown out to $44 billion a year. Now, I've reported and I've heard of cases where people have lost 20, 30, 40, up to 80% of their funding. And their respite's been cut back by 90% because the NDIA want to save money. Now, Bill Shorten promised. He promised this would not happen. But let's look back. When the Senate inquiry was over and the changes were made to save money, what did they do? The Labor Party do? They didn't drop the policies on how they're going to save money until the day before the legislation was adopted. So people with disabilities, support workers, service providers didn't have a chance to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to see where all the cuts are being made, where all the savings are being made. And Bill Shorten promised that this wouldn't happen. People wouldn't lose their funding. They wouldn't get kicked off the NDIS. Now, I go on a lot of social platforms and I've read a lot of stories of people losing funding, being kicked off the NDIS. I actually personally know someone who just kicked off the NDIS. He has MS. Yes, they need to save money, but why? I've said for decades, when the government wants to save money, it's always the pensioners who cop it in the neck first. Why not go after these fraudsters? People rorting the system like the taxi industry, because they're getting millions of dollars a year. Now, in that 60 Minutes report, there was different organisations that had been ripped off. One was 340 times, another one was like 454 times, another one was over 700 times in 1 year. So it's millions of dollars at stake. And the taxi industry is just brushing it on the carpet and just using all the right words to deflect, to what's going on. But what really pisses me off, they've got evidence from a dash cam of assaults going on from the taxi driver to his customers. Now, this bloke pleaded guilty to 499 charges. How many of those were assaults? Why didn't he go to jail? Now, the magistrate said in this case that the laws need to be made. Well, I beg to differ. I believe we have laws already in place. It's just that they're not used because magistrates have their own discretion on what charges they can put on people who break the law. So from drink driving, assault and fraud, he got fined $20,000 and didn't see the inside of a jail. For every case of assault, he should have got 6 months non-parole. Yeah, fining him $20,000. It's a lot of money, but it's not a deterrent because I'll guarantee you he's back out there doing the same thing. So why is the government not going after the taxi industry? I mean, the taxi industry could adopt what Uber does with their service provision. Now you book it through an app and it has the make and model of the different cars. There's picture ID of the drivers, their ages, whether they're pet friendly or not, how long the distance is from point A to point B, how long it should take, and roughly how much it should cost. Now, in that 60 Minutes report, the reporter took a trip and he was charged $54. But next day on his Channel 9 cab charge call sheet, he was charged $174. So why can't the taxi industry adopt a similar process to what Uber has? You know, the dash cam, why can't they live stream what they're doing in the cab so family members, support workers and service providers can ensure that the people with disabilities are being treated with respect and dignity. So this bloke, he's got 499 charges. Obviously, a lot of those people couldn't communicate. So they can't communicate. It's not a problem because they can't complain, and it's, you know, they can't tell you how hurt they are when they were violated, physically violated. That mongrel should have been in jail for years. He should not be allowed to drive a taxi. He was convicted of 0.191 blood alcohol while he was driving, and it's supposed to be 0 for taxi drivers. So, you know, if he doesn't lose his license for 5 or 10 years for being 4 times the limit, over like nearly 5 times the limit. Why isn't the NDIA going after these industries, the taxi industry? Why go after the participants of the NDIA, taking their funding away because we're coming up to an election and they want to look good? Why not go after the taxi industry? Why not go after service providers? I mean, there's been the last couple of years is like up around where I live, further out west, 3 people have died in the last 18 months because the service provider wasn't doing their job. Why are they allowed to operate? Why aren't these people facing manslaughter charges? But like I said, it's the pensioner who cops it in the neck first, especially around when we're coming up to an election, because they want to make themselves look good. Oh, we're saving money. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I reported on a young man with cerebral palsy. His parents wanted to get a device that would weigh him when they lift him out of bed with a hoist. Didn't you have to keep an eye on his weight? So what happened? When they put in a request for this weighing device, they did a plan review without their knowledge. Now, this young man was getting respite for 24 hours a week. 4 days a week, 24 hours. So he's getting out 6 hours a day. Now, this young man lost $80,000 of his funding, and that 24-hour respite was cut back to just under 4 hours. The Labor Party will do that to a person with a disability, but they won't do anything to an industry that's rorting millions of dollars a year Australia-wide. You know, Bill Shorten promised. He promised everyone that people wouldn't have their funding cut. They wouldn't be kicked off the NDIS. And it's the biggest untruth I've ever heard a politician sprout in the last few years. I'm glad Bill Shorten's gone. And I personally hope. Now, I used to be a staunch Labor supporter because when I grew up, if you're the working man, like blue collar worker, you voted Labor because they looked after the working man. I became a member of the Labor Party, a paid member of the Labor Party. But when Kevin Rudd came in, went out, come back in, and Julia Gillard is when I decided never to vote Labor again. They're that bad at wasting money. The younger people might not remember this, but the BER, the Building the Education Revolution, where they spent tens of billions of dollars in schools. The insulation, where they give houses free insulation. The NDIS was rushed out, wasn't trialled long enough, or wide enough in my opinion. They rushed it out while they were in power. Now, don't get me wrong, the NDIA has done more to promote people with disabilities in the last 10 years than anything else has done in the last 100. Over 19% of the NDIA workforce has a disability, which is absolutely brilliant. They have a workforce of support workers of 80,000 support workers. It's a whole industry has been created. And when I first went on the NDIS, every time I applied for something, they said no. And when I complained about it, all they ever said, oh, well, it's like building a plane while you try flying it. It's not an excuse. It's a terrible statement to make. Now, the reforms, in my opinion, have gone down the wrong track. There was a service provider down the Central Coast who owes the tax office over $4 million, owes their staff over $700,000. And what happened to them when they got found that they did the wrong thing? They were banned from the NDIA for 2 years. 2 years, banned for 2 years. They took 100% of people's funding while they were operating and never provided a service to them. Now, I've heard that the police are now looking into laying charges against the operator of that service provider. And I hope they go to jail for a very long time. And they are forced to pay that money back out of their own pocket. But the NDIA have to stop abusing the participants of the NDIA by taking their funding, reducing their funding, doing plan reviews, calling them up without any notice or whatsoever and say, oh, look, I just need to ask you a question. And they answer the question, and that's the plan review. And they cut their funding. Now, as I stated before, I've written to Bill Shorten quite a few times asking questions about different things, about the NDIS. And all he's ever done is refer it to the NDIA. That's all he's ever done. So what I've done this time is I went to Barnaby Joyce, my local federal member. Because I don't trust the minister in charge of the NDIS to do the right thing or to listen to people. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Now, we're supposed to have the IAC, the Independent Advisory Council. They're supposed to be our representatives to the NDIA board and to the NDIA. But you can't talk to them. I sent emails off to nearly every member of the IAC. Never once heard back from anyone. Lodged a complaint. Got an email back defending the person I made the complaint about. And the IAC members are appointed by the Minister for the NDIA. So how could they be truly independent if they're appointed to those positions? Why can't we elect our representatives? Now, I've been on government committees for a couple of decades now, and I've done a lot of volunteer work. And I believe I could do a better job than anyone on the IAC at the moment. I've requested a copy of the minutes and the agenda for the last couple of years. And because I'm blind, I couldn't access the website, and I can't access PDF files because they're not compatible. Adobe's not compatible with the MacBook. So then it's not accessible. So I asked it for an accessible format. And they said, I'll just follow this link. So I had to lodge a complaint to the Privacy Commissioner, the AIOC, to get access to the minutes in the agenda. I ended up getting the minutes in the agenda. I didn't get them as individual files. They put them in one file and saved it as a PDF when I asked for it in a Word format because I can't access PDF. But the bloody thing's 402 pages long. So if I read 50 pages and I'd turn everything off and come back the next day and turn everything back on, I've got to start it all over again at page 1. So now I've got to go back and ask for the minutes and the agenda as a single item. Now, I believe this is done to deter me and other people from trying to access information which is publicly accessible, which is public property. Once the minutes have been accepted and confirmed, then it becomes a public document. But I know No, not the NDIA. They make it as hard as possible. So I strongly urge the NDIA and the IAC to stop the minister from cutting funding to participants of the NDIS and go after these businesses like the taxi industry and some of these service providers that are operating who shouldn't be operating, and to follow through and make sure when people are being transported in a taxi and being physically assaulted on a constant basis that they are charged. It is the NDIA's responsibility to protect those people, and they're not doing it. All they want to do is save money because we're coming up to an election. Outrageous. But how do we redress our grievances to the minister and to the NDIA when we don't have any representation whatsoever? The IAC do not talk to anyone outside that committee. So the average person doesn't have access to them, but they're supposed to be our representatives. Crazy. So if anyone else out there who has a story similar to this, please email me at blindadvocate007@gmail.com or go to my LinkedIn profile, which has been posted in the comment section here on YouTube. Also, a couple of weeks ago, I had to go to a hospital down near Sydney. I had to go in on the Sunday for a procedure on the Monday, which was an angiogram and a thing called a toe. Now, I didn't know what that was until just before I had the procedure done. And apparently they put a camera down your throat so they can take 3D images of your heart, because I've got a severe leak in the mitral valve. So I need open heart surgery. But when I went in there on a Sunday afternoon, that night, I had the most horrific experience. And the next morning, again, more abuse. I'm not going to go into detail at the moment because I am going to lodge a complaint. So I'm asking if anyone out there who's gone into the hospital system, either public or private, who's had bad experiences with nurses, please email me at my address, blindadvocate007@gmail.com, or use my link in the LinkedIn profile with the links in the comment section, because I'd like to hear some other experiences. Well, that's about all for today. Next week, I'm doing an interview on somebody else's podcast. So I'm going to get a copy of that afterwards, and I'll post it onto the YouTube channel later that day or the next day. I'll do it as soon as possible. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening. Remember, please hit that subscribe button. I really need your support. It would mean a lot if you subscribed. And hit the notifications and hit select all. So that way, when I do a live stream, it'll come up and let you know. So you can just tune in. Or I might just leave it there. Thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.